Welcome back to the show. According to legend, 10,000 years ago, the Sheikah saved the kingdom. Why were they punished? It sounds like a simple question, but it's more complicated. This is what I'm exploring today, and the conclusions that I've come to are surprising. Spoilers ahead for Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. Part 1. The Sheikah. They are the most loyal servants of Goddess Hylia. The Sheikah have worked in the shadows to protect and ensure the supremacy of the kingdom, as well as its divine ruler, the princess who carries the bloodline of their goddess. In the cutscenes of the past of Tears of the Kingdom, during the founding of the kingdom, there are no Sheikah to be seen. It can be assumed that they are around, because let's face it, there are always Sheikah around. They are sometimes the obvious guardian, or sometimes they hide in plain sight, but they are always there keeping an eye on things. There are of course differing views on timeline placement. Some, like myself, don't even think that Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are in the same continuity as the other games. That isn't the focus here today though. I'm trying to keep this strictly in the realm of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, but I will also be drawing on Skyward Sword as well. You see, the Sheikah have always been working on advancing the goals of Hylia. We can see their symbol clear as day on the time shift stones in that ancient era. It would seem that the Hylians, named after their deity, possess an affinity for time. Perhaps this is what drew the attention of the Zonai, and led to the eventual union of one of the last remaining ones, Hyrule, and the Hylia High Priestess Sonia. The event of Hyrule's founding was more than likely observed by the Sheikah from the shadows. The arrival of Sonia's distant relative surely would have raised a few eyebrows, inviting investigation into the matter. Perhaps even placing a Sheikah servant very close by, just in case this Zelda was a spy or a threat to Hylia's descendant. For whatever reason, the Sheikah remained quiet during the imprisoning war, but they were busy. They observed the technology that the Zonai demonstrated, saw how Hyrule and Sonia created shrines to suppress the monsters, to suppress the darkness, as well as the power of the secret stones, not to mention the creation of sages from each member of the major races of Hyrule. Well, except for the Koroks. But perhaps the Koroks were already tasked with safeguarding the Master Sword. With Hyrule locked away with the Demon King in the imprisoning chamber, the passing of Minoru, and the ascension of Zelda to the heavens as a dragon, the Sheikah began to weave their plans and work their arts, inspired by those who came as close to the gods as ever any had seen. Part 2. Cycles of Calamity. It's not clear how much time has passed between the founding of Hyrule and the ancient battle depicted on the Sheikah tapestry. In the present, Impa claims that it has been 10,000 years since that conflict, and many believe that the cycles of Calamity take that long to complete. I, however, have to disagree. I believe that the Battle of the Ancient Hero was in effect the conclusion of a long struggle with more rapid emergences of the Calamity. Hyrule sealed the Demon King, but the sheer amount of darkness from him was overwhelming. Locked away, frozen, with the Demon King's consciousness suppressed, his darkness, his miasma, his gloom, his malice would continue to grow. The fuel source of this darkness is unknown for sure, but we outsiders to the world of Hyrule know of the curse of the Demon Lord demise, and it seems more than obvious that allusions are being made to him with the Demon King. All the same, that darkness, hate, and malice would continue to build up from this spot, emerging and wreaking havoc, all while the monsters would grow in number, returning every blood moon. No doubt the ancient people would protect their land, fight back against the darkness, all while the Garden of Time was sent into the sky to protect it from the evils. After all, the reason why they were doing that is because Zelda had shared with the ancient sages that a future hero would arise and face the Demon King. In fact, everyone in that room heard his name clearly. His name is Link. They had no idea when he would emerge, when the struggle of the Demon King would end. The Hylians attempted to plug the growing miasma by building a mighty castle over the sealing grounds, and left a warning against disturbing the area. Little did they know that deep underground, the miasma would spew out, accumulating endlessly in the void beneath the ground. After many emergences, in a time frame far less than 10,000 years, perhaps even as short as a decade or a century per repetition, new calamities would emerge threatening the growth of the flowering kingdom. Something needed to be done to solve this problem, and with permission from the royal family, the Sheikah stepped up to do just that. Part 3. Sheikah Technology. Raru's intention with the seal were noble, but it was only temporary, and neither he nor Ganondorf knew how long the stalemate would last. It was clear that the force behind the Demon King was continuing to grow, and so the Sheikah turned to the Zonai ruins and the technology of the past for guidance. They knew about the Shrines of Light, and about the many sites around the kingdom that held significance to the Zonai, in a process likely overseen by Master Monk Maz Koshia. They started simple, creating their own shrines to aid in the suppression of monsters, all while doubling down on the prophecy of the swordsman, Link. The Sheikah shrines were modeled after Raru's Shrines of Light, but were technological and not spiritual in nature. They could rise and retract into the ground, and similar to the Shrines of Light, transfer a person into a trial. Perhaps they built their playground in another realm of existence. It isn't clear, but it seems unlikely that these massive chambers were built in the real world. Given that some of them would have extended into the depths below, we simply see no evidence of them down there. They would also create a series of towers capable of mapping the world. They would have been aware of the Pora Pad, though they didn't have access to it, but perhaps gleaned what it could do and used it as a template for their own device, the Sheikah Slate, and thus they created a teleportation function of their own. Along with that teleportation, utility runes were created that the Slate could use. The ability to create ice from water, to freeze objects in time, and create explosions were just a few of those wonders. This by itself would have given the future hero the means to combat the Calamity. But why stop there? So caught up in what they could do, they stopped considering what they should do. And so, the march of progress continued. Let me interrupt for a moment, guys. If you haven't done so already, please like and subscribe to the channel. The channel is still growing, and I need support, but it has come a long ways in the last few weeks. If you've already subscribed, thank you. Now, let's get back to the theory. Part 4. War Machines. With the recurring emergences of the Calamity, not to mention the growing waves of monsters that came with each one, the Sheikah decided to level the playing field by creating an army of their own. Guardians, they called them. Mechanical creatures, autonomous, who could identify a threat, lock on, and shoot a massive beam of energy to destroy the target. Their 6 legs allowed them mobility to move across even the most imposing terrain. Aerial versions, turrets, and even training variants were created. Alongside the Guardians, weapons channeling raw energy were also created. A full arsenal of weapons more advanced and potent than anything the kingdom had seen since the Zonai themselves. Though the Sheikah did dabble with older techniques, and even attempted to create a replica of the Master's Sword, or something on par with it, for the Hylians to equip themselves with, though they could never quite get the metal as durable as they would like. As good as the Royal Guard gear was, the energy weapons they created were the pinnacle of weaponry, as they would cleanly slice through whatever they struck, save shields made from the same energy source. These weapons were of course inspired by the Zonai as well, as their weapons and shields functioned in the same way. The Sheikah even created a copy of the weapon tips that would instantly disassemble an entity, as though they were being teleported away with no destination. Of all of these weapons, the greatest invention had yet to be created, the one that would cement the Sheikah's place in history, the Divine Beast. Each one was modeled after the Zonai mask worn by the sages. Depictions of these animals could be seen in the areas of that world. Camels on the Great Gerudo Pyramid, geckos and lizards on Death Mountain, a majestic bird with the Rito, and of course an elephant for the Zora. Which I'm sure makes sense, somehow. Ahem. All the same, I believe that each of these beasts were given a name from those who inspired them, the names of the sages who fought to imprison the Demon King: Meadow, Darunia, Naboris, and Ruta. These divine beasts were not meant to replace the sages, but rather to complement them. The secret stones of those sages had been sealed away in temples that the ancient Sheikah simply did not have access to. So they used their creativity dabbling into the arts of the Zonai, and in turn, they created something of their own. Instead of sages, they would create pilots for the divine beast, create a series of shrines to test those pilots, and imbued them with an amplifier for their own elemental power. That way they could control the beast. These spirit orbs would serve as the keys to the divine beast, and thus the champions were born. Part 5. The Power Source. All of this technology requires power. In Breath of the Wild, we could see that there were repositories of power, of force, in a few locations around the kingdom, each producing blue flame. The source of this power isn't really known, but there was one popular theory, that the source was converted from malice from the sealed Ganondorf. This concept is reinforced now. Listen to what Ganondorf says regarding Raru's actions.
My heart and steal my magic. You plan to hold me here.
You bind my heart and steal my magic. You plan to hold me here. I double-checked this in Japanese just to make sure, as the localization can always be troublesome. This comes out more directly as, you bind my heart and take my magic. You plan to seal me. So the localization is spot on. What I believe Raru is doing here is starting a process to convert Ganondorf's darkness into spiritual energy. You can see the power flowing from Ganondorf into Raru, shifting from black and red to blue and then green. It forms a spiral, the same type of spiral that we see coming from all the shrines, but this time coming up into the central stone in the imprisoning chamber. If we follow the central stone, this spike, all the way up, what do we find? Why, it's the very foundation of the castle, a huge stone pillar stretching all the way to the throne room. And what is in the center of this pillar? A little thing that we know as the Astral Observatory. At least that would be the case once the Sheikah built it. This stone is ancient, dating back to the founding of the kingdom, which means that when the Sheikah started all of this, they dug down into that stone and hollowed it out to create their observatory. An interesting name, with a full 360-degree view of the kingdom and its sky. But the real purpose of this was to soak up the power that Raru was converting, and use it to fuel all of the Sheikah wonders. It would seem that the old theory about Ganondorf being used as fuel is true. Perhaps the act of building the Astral Observatory was one of the things that caused the seal to weaken. Perhaps this stone, not to mention the others, are more important than they initially seemed. What is clear is that the Sheikah tampered with things that they shouldn't have, and that would exacerbate the problem. They had their power source though, the means to perform their technological miracles. The stage was almost set. There was just one more thing that they needed to do to face the upcoming calamity. Part 6. Crossing a Line. There is an unsolved mystery about the imprisoning war. Why is it that a hero never appeared to take up the Master Sword? Had such an individual appeared, the battle may have gone much different, and the King of Light would not have had to have made such a sacrifice. The Sheikah were not about to leave the fate of the future up to chance. After all, time appeared to be circular, right? Zelda appeared in the past with knowledge of the future, setting up the future so her hero could triumph. Every hero needs an origin, and so the Sheikah took to the path of making that hero. A while ago, I put out a theory about the Shrine of Resurrection being used to build a new Link after he had died in Hateno Field. I'll link to it in the description, but it is one of my earlier works, so not the best of recordings. That aside, the idea that the Shrine of Resurrection could be used to rejuvenate a person has merit. When we see Ganondorf's corpse in modern times, there is something missing. Raru's body. Well, most of it. His arm and secret stone are still in place, but Ganondorf's posture is different. If Raru's body had been removed, then his weight would no longer counterbalance Ganondorf, likely leading to him leaning back more. This makes sense. Furthermore, the arm and the stone were ultimately the power source of Raru that was being used to convert the darkness into light, and the power source that the Sheikah were sucking up into their shrines, towers, guardians, and beasts. I believe it is possible that the Sheikah, either with or without permission, collected the body of Raru and used it to create something new. They crossed the line and brought back, at least partially, something that the world thought was gone. They brought to life a new Zonai, or perhaps made something that was part Zonai. They created the ancient hero to take center stage in their most grandest achievement, the complete vanquishing of the Calamity. The ancient hero would have been raised and trained by the Sheikah, specifically to have a balanced mindset equal of power, wisdom, and courage. Nothing could be left to chance. He would take up the Master Sword, fitting the criteria of the hero. He would join the princess in the battle against the Calamity, backed by hundreds of mechanized units, 4 divine beasts and their pilots, and would deliver the final blow so that the princess could eradicate the malice from the face of the world. It was near perfect, but the land was not without its scars. For a stray divine beast blast blew a hole clean through Hebra Mountain. The Calamity was defeated, and so the Sheikah did the final act to prevent the malice from accumulating again. Their monks would entomb themselves in their shrines, self-mummifying, and using their sheer force to repel and keep that darkness from rising. It worked all too well. And so, for 10,000 or so years, there was no sign of malice, and the nightmare of the Calamity faded into myth. While the kingdom welcomed the peace of this outcome, the royal family was not thrilled with what had happened to claim it. The damage to the land, power amassed unlike any in recorded history, and perhaps a temptation of conquest whispering into the king's ear. What crossed the line, though, was the resurrection of the Zonai, a sky deity whose divine origin challenged the place of the royalty of the kingdom. This is when the king ordered the Sheikah to disband their technology, to bury their machines and engage in a simple, traditional lifestyle. It was a bitter pill to swallow. We all know the outcome. Many of the Sheikah accepted the orders, while others remained sealed in their shrines to keep the darkness at bay. A third branch defected, disgusted and insulted about how they, the ones who had saved the kingdom, were being treated. This branch would of course become the Yiga clan, and turn to help the one that they had fought against, becoming loyal soldiers to their magnificent one, soldiers of the Calamity itself. Part 7. Conclusion. What I've outlined here is hypothetical, of course, but I feel that there is enough information in the games to suggest this position. Raru's body is missing, and you would think that if Ganondorf dried out and became a mummy, so too would have Raru, much like the hand that we see. Nobody ever brings up that his body is missing, though. Curious, don't you think? The Shrine of Resurrection has the means of bringing a person back from the dead. We've seen this with Link, and if you ask me, it did just that. His amnesia and white memories were the result of his resurrection. His closest allies from his time with Zelda were all missing after all. And while I of course realize that there is a game mechanic to facilitate an open world experience with non-linear storytelling, it is still a fact that Link doesn't know who these people who he fought alongside with are. who his king was, who his princess was, so much so that she even questions him at the end of the game if he remembers her. Perhaps his recovered memories are legitimately his own. Or perhaps Princess Zelda, who we see has a telepathic link to him, gave him those memories that just so happen to correspond with the images she took on the Sheikah slate. Returning to the topic at hand, could the ancient hero depicted on the tapestry look like a Zonai? Because he is a Zonai, one created through the power of the Shrine of Resurrection. Why does he have red hair? I'm not really sure, and I cringe to think about the idea of some of Ganondorf's hair getting mixed up with the body. But I digress. In the end, the ancient hero may possess a blood connection to the Knights of Hyrule, even to Link, but we don't know for sure. As for suppressing Ganondorf's darkness, well, the Sheikah may have been unaware of just how deep the depths were. For under the imprisoning chamber is a place known as Gloom's Lair. It could be that for the next 10,000 or so years, the excess darkness would seep down into this pit and a grand Gloom tree would grow from it. Its roots can be found all over the depths, and in all of that time, his power would grow and grow, all while his mind would dream of nothing short than wiping all life from the face of the kingdom. Thanks for watching the episode. I know this is a departure from the mystery style videos I've been doing, but I really wanted something more meaty this week. I've been thinking about this theory for over a month now, looking for supporting evidence and good footage. All the same, I hope that you enjoyed it, and I'm eager to hear your feedback on it. If you like what I do, liking the video and subscribing to the channel really helps me out. Clicking that bell notification icon helps so you don't miss out on upcoming videos. For those of you who have the means to help out more, consider joining my Patreon or becoming a channel member. That will give you access to my Discord server where we can talk more directly. And I think you all know I can get pretty chatty at night. Seriously though, if you are here, thank you for watching to the end. This last month has been really uplifting. Just seeing the large number of people watching my video and leaving comments has really helped my self-esteem. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Now, next week is another 7 Mysteries video, so time to get to work. Stay safe and may the way of the hero lead to the Triforce.